There is one invitation that Guy Penrod has talked around for years, not hiding it, but not naming it either. Those who were close to the Gaither world when the call came through say he held the phone a long time before he gave his answer. Bill Gaither had spent weeks assembling what would become one of the most emotionally significant homecoming gatherings since the franchise began, a reunion-style taping that brought back the voices that had defined the Gaither Vocal Band's most celebrated decade. David Phelps was going to be there, Mark Lowry, Michael English. A chair had Guy Penrod's name on it. He left it empty. What Guy has shared about why, and what his wife Angie said to him the morning that invitation arrived, is the most direct thing anyone connected to the Gaither world has said out loud about these 17 years of deliberate absence. Stay with us, because the explanation is not bitterness, and it is not regret. It is something more specific than either of those. And by the 10-minute mark of this video, you will understand exactly why one of the most beloved voices in homecoming history kept saying no to the stage he helped build. If you grew up with gospel music in the 1990s, Guy Penrod's voice lives in your memory, in a place that doesn't really belong to music at all. It belongs to Sunday afternoons, to the den furniture, to the VHS tape that sat on top of the television because somebody in the house put it on every single week without being asked. He joined the Gaither Vocal Band in 1994, stepping into a group that was already beloved but not yet legendary. What happened in the years that followed, the recordings, the homecoming tapings, the television broadcasts that reached into homes across America and beyond, turned that group into something closer to a ministry than a music act. And Guy was a central reason why. When he sang Redeemed at a homecoming taping in the late 1990s, the camera stayed on the faces in the audience, faces that had stopped thinking about being on camera. That is the test of a real singer in this tradition. When the people in the seats forget where they are, you have done something that goes beyond performance. He was with the Gaither Vocal Band for 15 years. 15 years of Christmas tapings and anniversary specials, and long stretches of highway between cities, with Mark Lowry in the back making everyone on the bus question their life choices. He was present for the recordings that put homecoming on the map for a generation of fans who had never heard of Southern gospel before. Bill Gaither put a camera in a room and let something honest happen. For millions of people who followed this music since those years, Guy Penrod was not simply a singer in a celebrated group. He was the sound of a specific kind of faith. Not complicated, not theatrical, just true. Then, in January of 2009, he walked away. The announcement was cordial on both sides. Guy needed to be home. He and his wife Angie had 8 children on a farm in Tennessee, and a touring schedule does not care how old your youngest is or how much your teenagers need their father in the room. Bill Gaither said what a man of his character says, that Guy was family, that the door was open, that the Gaither community would always be his community. What nobody fully said at the time, what has taken 17 years to come into clear focus, is that walking away was not the hard part. Staying away was. The first invitations came back quickly. That is not surprising. The homecoming world was still in full production through 2009 and into the early years after. Bill Gaither does not stop building rooms because one chair is empty. He finds a way to fill it, and then he finds a way to call the person who belonged in it. Guy said no to the first round of invitations. That made sense to people. He had just left. He needed time. He said no to the second round. That started a different conversation. By 2012 and 2013, the gospel community was paying attention to the pattern in a way it had not initially. Significant homecoming tapings were happening, the kind attached to anniversaries and legacy events that pull in names from every era of the franchise, and Guy Penrod's name was consistently absent from the roster, not because he had not been asked. Because he had been asked, and the answer kept being the same. The natural assumption, the one that fills silence in any small community, was that something had broken, a relationship, an understanding, some private rupture that the public side of the Gaither world was too gracious to name. Gospel music runs on the appearance of unity, and when a significant absence goes unexplained for long enough, speculation does the explaining instead. But the people who actually know Guy have pushed back on that reading for years. There was no rupture. There was no grievance being kept alive. The warmth between Guy and Bill Gaither was genuine when he left, and has remained genuine since. What was happening had nothing to do with the Gaither organization, and everything to do with a calculation that existed only in Guy Penrod's head, a running accounting of where he was needed and where he was not. 8 children across a span of years wide enough that the oldest and youngest might as well be from different families. A working farm in Middle Tennessee that does not maintain itself. A wife who had managed the full weight of a household while Guy was on the road for 15 years, and was now, rightfully, expecting a different arrangement. Every week on a tour bus is a week of decisions made without you, school events attended by someone else, conversations that need a father present and get a phone call instead. The math was not complicated. It just had to be done honestly. And here is the thing about honest arithmetic. It does not care what you are giving up. It only cares what you are choosing. Guy Penrod was choosing the farm and the children, and the daily ordinary presence that a family needs from the man at its center. The Gaither stage would survive without him. His children's childhoods would not. That logic held for years, and for most of those years, it was enough. But there came a point, a specific event, a specific phone call, a specific moment of genuine weight, where the invitation was not routine, where what Guy was being asked to do carried enough history behind it that saying no required something more than math. It required a decision. Stay with us, because what he decided, and what Angie said to him before he made it, is the most honest thing anyone has said out loud about what these 17 years of absence actually cost. And this is where the story lands on something that nobody in Guy Penrod's circle expected him to name as plainly as he eventually did. The invitation that mattered most, the one that people close to the Gaither world have described as the clearest test of everything Guy had been building since 2009, came during a period when the Homecoming franchise was assembling what amounted to a genuine reunion of its most celebrated era. The concept was simple and emotionally loaded. Bring back the voices that had defined the Gaither Vocal Band when the Homecoming videos were at their widest reach. Put them in a room. Let it happen the way it always happened in those rooms, without a script, without choreography, just people who knew each other, and knew the music, and knew what the audience needed to feel. David Phelps had confirmed. Mark Lowry was in. Michael English, who had traveled his own long road back to this community and arrived at something real on the other side of it, was going to be there. Wes Hampton. A gathering that would have looked, to any fan who had followed this music since the early Homecoming years, like something they had privately hoped for without believing it would actually happen. Bill Gaither called Guy personally. That detail matters. This was not a booking inquiry sent through a management office. This was Bill Gaither picking up the phone himself and asking Guy Penrod to come back to a room that had been built, in meaningful part, with his voice. Guy said no. What makes this different from the years of routine refusals is what Guy has shared about the days surrounding that call. He did not say no quickly. He sat with it. He talked to Angie. And what Angie told him, in what Guy has described as the conversation that settled the question, was not permission to go and not a command to stay. It was 2 questions. She asked him what he thought he would feel, 6 months after that taping, if he had gone. And then she asked him what he thought he would feel if he hadn't. He already knew the answers. He had known them before she finished asking. He stayed home. The taping happened without him. The room filled with the voices it was built for. The audience received it the way that audience always receives something they were not certain they would be given. And Guy Penrod, some miles away on a farm in Tennessee, was doing something he has mentioned more than once when this period has come up in conversation. He was at one of his son's baseball games. Not as a dramatic counterpoint to what was happening on a homecoming stage somewhere, just as the honest answer to where he was that afternoon. A field in Tennessee. His kid at the plate. An afternoon that nobody filmed, nobody will write about, and nobody remembers except the people who were there. He watched some of that taping later, and what he has said about that experience, carefully, in the plain way he says most things, is that he watched it and felt grateful. Not regret, grateful. Grateful that the music existed, grateful for the men in that room, and settled, genuinely settled, about where he had been instead. That is the one homecoming invitation Guy Penrod turned down and never regretted. And the reason he has never regretted it is the same reason he has given, in different words, every time the subject has come up across 17 years. The stage was always going to be there. His son's game was not. Angie Penrod is, by every account from people who know them, the quiet center of everything Guy has built since he came home. She is not a woman who pushed him away from ministry or away from music. She has watched him build a solo career that has been, by any honest measure, genuinely meaningful. Albums that connected with the same audience that followed him through his Gaither years. Concerts where the people in the seats came not out of obligation or nostalgia, but because they specifically wanted to be in that room. What Angie did, in that conversation about the reunion taping, was ask the right question at the right moment. And Guy was honest enough with himself to know the answer before she finished asking it. Bill Gaither has never spoken about any of this with anything other than evident warmth. He has said in various contexts over the years that Guy Penrod is family. He says it the way a man says it when he means it, rather than the way an organization says it in a prepared statement. The relationship between them is not a casualty of 17 years of declined invitations. If anything, it may be more durable for it, built on the kind of mutual understanding that survives a long string of no's, because both men knew, without needing to discuss it at length, what the no meant. For those of us who have followed Guy Penrod's journey, since those early homecoming recordings, what this comes down to is something we recognize without needing it explained. We have watched many artists in this community move through the space between their calling and their family. Most of those stories are complicated. Most involve compromises pulled in both directions, years on the road followed by years of repair, or years of presence followed by a career that never reached what it might have been. The clean version of that story, the one where a man simply knows what matters most and acts on it, without a public crisis and without visible regret, is less common than people tend to assume. Guy Penrod may have the clean version. That does not mean it was simple. Nobody with 8 children and a working farm and a solo career sustained without major label infrastructure behind it is living the effortless version of anything. What it means is that he made a decision in January of 2009 and has been living inside it consistently ever since. No public wavering, no interview announcing second thoughts, no post lamenting what he missed. Just a man on a farm in Tennessee, present and choosing it, and occasionally walking onto a Gaither stage when the timing is right, and the season at home allows it. Those appearances have become, for this reason, something different from ordinary concert performances. When Guy Penrod shows up at a homecoming event now, the audience receives him the way you receive something you had stopped counting on. The warmth in a room like that is not ordinary applause. It carries all 17 years of his absence inside it. If you have been a fan of Guy's since those early recordings, if you can still hear exactly how he sounded on I Will Serve Thee, or I Believe in a Hill Called Mount Calvary, you know what we mean when we say that voice has not diminished. It sounds like a man who has lived more of what he was singing about, and in this tradition, that is the whole point. What do you think? Looking back at the choices you made between career and family, during the years when both were pulling hardest, would you make the same ones today? There is no wrong answer. Leave it in the comments below. This community has been sitting with that question in one form or another for a long time, and the conversation down there is usually worth more than the video that starts it. There is one more part of this story that most people have not fully connected yet. Guy Penrod is not the only man in the Gaither orbit who has had to reckon with this particular tension between the life a ministry creates and the life a family needs. But the way different artists have moved through it tells you a great deal about what makes each man's version of the story his own. Lowry spent years as one of the most visible presences in homecoming history, and when his second season with the Gaither Vocal Band came to a close in 2013, the transition carried the warmth and humor that have always defined Mark's place in this community. His situation was different from Guy's, different family circumstances, a different kind of creative restlessness that has always driven him. But both men arrived at a point where their presence in the Gaither world became selective rather than constant. And both have spoken about that transition, with something that sounds less like loss and more like arrival. Michael English's road back to the homecoming community, after the very public rupture of the mid-1990s, is a story that deserves its own full telling. What is relevant here is what Bill Gaither's response to Michael's situation revealed about the man at the center of all of this. Bill did not cut Michael off. He waited. He kept the door open through years when closing it would have been easier and more defensible. When Michael was ready to come back, the community was ready to receive him. That patience, that particular combination of high standards and genuine grace, is what makes the Gaither world different from almost everything else in the music industry. It also explains why Guy Penrod has never felt any reason to burn a bridge. He did not leave because the relationship had soured. He left because he was needed somewhere else. The door that Bill Gaither holds open for artists who leave under those circumstances is a different door from the one that required Michael English years of real work to walk back through. Guy's door, by all indications, has been left ajar. The question has simply been whether the season was right to walk through it. What comes next for Guy Penrod is, at this point, genuinely open. He is 63. His youngest children are moving into their own lives. The farm in Tennessee is still there, still his, still the place where 17 years of decisions were made at a kitchen table rather than on a tour bus. And his voice, anyone who has been in a room with him recently will tell you, is not a voice in decline. It is a voice with more in it than it had at 32. There is a chapter ahead that the gospel community has not seen yet, whether it includes more Gaither stages, a deeper solo ministry, or something that nobody has thought to predict. The people who have followed him across these years are watching with the attention you give to something you know is not finished. One question stays open, and we want to put it directly to you before we go. If Bill Gaither calls again, not with a routine invitation, but with the kind of phone call that is clearly about something more than one taping, does Guy Penrod say yes this time? And if he does, is the voice that walks into that room carrying something it could not have had without every season of no that came before it? The people closest to this story seem to believe the answer to both questions is yes. We will see. Whatever comes next, those who have followed this ministry for decades know one thing. The chair with Guy Penrod's name on it has been empty for a long time. And in the Gaither world, that kind of empty chair has a way of eventually being filled. If this story stayed with you, the next video in this series will as well. We have been covering what has been happening across the broader Gaither Vocal Band family, and what came out of those conversations is just as unexpected as anything we have talked about today.